Okay. Pop quiz. What is the gospel? Well, there's several answers to that. One is the good news, and you get 90 out of 100 points because you identified the meaning of the word gospel. Good news. Now, if you want the rest of the credit, you're going to need to be able to tell me or to say, okay, so what is the gospel? Not does what gospel mean. And the answer to that Paul gives, and you way back when I was taking kids to church camp for 5 weeks out of the summer, it felt like, and leading music because I could play the guitar, and one of the songs that we sang, it was kind of a favorite, had gestures and motions and all of the fun stuff that kids in the 80s liked, and it said he basically the chorus is, he came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross, my debt to pay, from the cross to the grave to the sky, Lord, I lift your name on high. Well, that's pretty much the gospel. Jesus came as a human being, lived among us. He was murdered, you can call it whatever, executed. I think Satan thought he was just murdering Jesus and getting him out of the way. But all that was happening was God was fulfilling his design. Anyway, Jesus was killed, then dead and buried. But he arose from the grave to prove that he had done the deal, that he really had paid for our sins, and then he ascended into heaven. And oh, by the way, that's our destination as well. So the good news is that Jesus became one of us. He died paying for our sin. He lived a sinless life, but he paid for our sin. He rose from the grave to prove that he had, and then he went ahead of us into heaven. That's the good news. That's the gospel. Paul writes in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 11, "And of this gospel I was appointed a herald and an apostle and a teacher." We talked about this last time. The herald, one who proclaims. The apostle, literally, the term apostle comes from a Greek word that means sent out. One sent out. He was then designated and sent out by God. But if you read the book of Acts, you realize that Antioch, the church at Antioch, laid hands on him and sent him out, and that was so okay. And a teacher. Paul taught with his words, but he taught with his life. You and I do too. I've talked about this several times before, but back, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, when Charles Barkley was, he was at the peak of his career, and he came on, I think it was a Nike commercial, but anyway, he came on the screen of the TV and he said, "I am not a role model." Well, sorry, Charles, you don't get to choose that. You can be a bad role model or a better role model or a good role model, but you don't get the choice of not being one. Because somebody is watching you. Somebody is learning from what you say and what you do. The best teachers, the very best teachers, are the ones who their doing is consistent with their saying. Now, I'm not talking about the teachers you had in a classroom. I'm talking about the teachers you learned life from. Now, some of them may have been in the classroom, but I'm guessing that the majority of these people were not formally, academically, your designated teacher. I've got a host of men and women who taught me in this way. You are somebody's teacher. And this is an interesting deal. Paul knew that he had been appointed a herald, an apostle, and a teacher. Do you realize we have been too? Well, maybe not in the same way as the apostle Paul, but we have been appointed to be a herald, to proclaim truth and hope. And what Paul writes in the verse just previous to this, that to herald that Jesus has destroyed death and has brought life and immortality to light through the good news, the gospel. We've been designated. We have been appointed. Every follower of Jesus has been appointed to be a herald. We don't all do it in the same way. Some of us are very verbal. Others, not so much. Now, I'm not talking about what a lot of times happens is, a person becomes a Christian and they're very reticent about talking about God because you just don't. I mean, you don't do that in polite society. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there are people who their lifestyle is full of words. And then there are people who they don't talk very much. They're just not very verbal. Those people are going to herald in a way that's different from these outgoing, verbally expressive people. So I believe that your spiritual gifts make a difference in this. Your temperament, as I said, makes a difference in this. Do you believe this? Your upbringing and background and education. It's more than one thing. But all of us have been appointed as a herald. And because of that, we have been appointed in an apostolic way to be sent out. God intends for us to, it's not this fortress mentality. It's not the more I ponder it and the older I've gotten, the more this has become apparent to me. A lot of churches call the auditorium a sanctuary. I kind of don't like that term. There are a couple of reasons. One, you're not going to find that in the Bible, especially the New Testament. Our sanctuary, because really, what is a sanctuary? It is a protected environment. Our sanctuary is God Himself. Where we meet for the singing and preaching at a church gathering is not supposed to be a sanctuary. It's a gathering place. Yeah. But do you realize you and I have brothers and sisters across the globe, many thousands of miles away, who literally have no sanctuary because politically, culturally, socially, their faith is illegal. It is persecuted. Where's the sanctuary? They generally exist in what we call underground churches, and many of them are literally underground in a basement somewhere with blackout curtains pulled across whatever windows are there. They sing quietly. They gather clandestinely, yeah. But and so I guess for in a way that is a sanctuary for them, and yet they are they haven't escaped life in their culture. I don't like it because I think in America, Christians have this keep me safe mentality, which I'm not saying that's evil, but it more often, instead of meaning keep me safe, it means keep me comfortable. And that doesn't work. And we're going to see Paul's example of that. It doesn't work. And just, well, maybe not on this run, but next time for sure. He sent us out into the world. Some people, they're sent out beyond the borders of their own community. I don't think that's everybody. I think most of us are sent out into our community, into the context where we live and work, where we relate to other people. You realize that that could mean across the street or across the globe. I don't decide those things. I don't determine those things, but God does. And regardless of how far or how near, we are ones sent forth with the message of a herald, the gospel, to teach. Okay. I think that's a big deal. Again, verse 11, and of this gospel I was appointed a herald and an apostle and a teacher. And now, verse 12, that is why I am suffering as I am. You might want to think, oh, gee, Paul had a horrible, I mean, he was such a good guy, but what a miscarriage of justice. The truth is, at this point in his life, he was convinced he would not survive this imprisonment. Generally, the Roman Empire and its judicial system was such that if he was judged to deserve corporal punishment, and I mean, if he was judged that his crime deserved his death, they were masters of killing people. Sometimes they would just lop off the head. Sometimes they would crucify. Tradition tells us that Paul asked to be crucified upside down. Imagine. See, what killed a person in the process of crucifixion was not the nails in the hands and feet. It was asphyxiation. As the muscles spasmed and grew weak so that the victim could not raise their rib cage enough to breathe in enough air to sustain them, they asphyxiated. And being hung upside down, oh boy. Paul said, this is why I'm suffering as I am. We're going to come back to that because it is so foreign to especially, I think, our American Christian mentality. So I'll pick it back up again next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.